The soft glow of dusk settled over the bustling streets of San Francisco as Olivia Bennet made her way toward La Mer, the city's most exclusive dining establishment. At 36, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup except for a touch of lip balm. Her comfortable jeans, navy blue sweater, and worn leather boots reflected her practical nature rather than her financial status. Tonight was important. After 8 years of marriage to tech visionary James Bennet, Olivia wanted to plan something special for their upcoming anniversary. James had been working tirelessly on launching his revolutionary sustainable energy platform, barely sleeping as the company prepared to go public. She wanted to surprise him with a reservation at La Mer, the restaurant where he had proposed to her all those years ago, back when he was just a promising engineer with big ideas and she was running art therapy programs at the Children's Hospital. Olivia checked her watch, a simple timepiece with a canvas strap that James had given her on their first anniversary. Perfect timing. She had just finished her weekly community garden project, helping underprivileged youth connect with nature. Traces of soil still remained under her fingernails despite her best efforts to clean up. She hadn't planned to dress up today. The reservation was for next week, and she simply wanted to secure it in person, knowing how notoriously difficult it was to get a table at La Mer. The restaurant came into view, an elegant stone building with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the large windows, Olivia could see crystal chandeliers suspended from high ceilings, illuminating tables covered in pristine white linen where San Francisco's elite dined in their finest attire. Taking a deep breath, Olivia pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The soft sounds of a live piano and the gentle clink of fine china created an atmosphere of refined exclusivity. Marcus, the maitre d', stood at his podium, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit. His eyes swept over Olivia, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly as he took in her casual appearance. "Good evening," Olivia said warmly. "I'd like to make a reservation for next Thursday evening, if possible." Marcus's expression remained professionally neutral, though his tone carried a hint of dismissal. "I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next 2 months, madam." Olivia smiled, undeterred. "I understand how busy you must be. It's for a special anniversary, and this place means a lot to my husband and me." Before Marcus could respond, a woman in an expensive designer dress approached the podium. Olivia recognized Sophia Reynolds, the wife of a prominent venture capitalist, often featured in local society pages. "Marcus, darling," Sophia called out, completely ignoring Olivia's presence. "Our table isn't quite ready, and Jeffrey is becoming impatient. You know how he gets when kept waiting." "Right away, Mrs. Reynolds," Marcus responded, his demeanor instantly transforming to deferential attentiveness. "I'll check on it immediately." Sophia finally glanced at Olivia, her eyes making a quick, dismissive assessment. She leaned toward Marcus, speaking in a stage whisper clearly meant to be overheard. "I thought La Mer had standards. The clientele seems to be slipping." Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I was just explaining that we're fully booked for the foreseeable future." Olivia felt a flush creep up her neck but maintained her composure. "As I was saying, it would be for our anniversary. Perhaps I could speak with the manager about any possible openings." "Listen," Sophia interrupted, turning to face Olivia directly. "This isn't some casual diner. People wait months for reservations. They dress appropriately." She gestured toward Olivia's soil-stained jeans with distaste. Olivia straightened her shoulders. "I understand the restaurant's prestige. I'm only trying to make a reservation for next week, not dine tonight." Sophia snorted derisively. Marcus, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to upset a regular patron like Mrs. Reynolds, gestured subtly to a woman in a sleek black dress who had been observing the exchange from nearby. The woman approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. "Is there a problem here, Marcus?" "Ms. Carter," Marcus replied, relief evident in his voice. "This woman was inquiring about a reservation." "I was explaining that we're fully booked," Sophia interjected before Olivia could speak. "But she seems to be having trouble understanding." Diane Carter, La Mer's manager, assessed Olivia with a cool, professional gaze. "I apologize, but Marcus is correct. We're fully booked for the next several months. Olivia reached into her purse. I understand this is a prestigious establishment. I'm prepared to place a deposit if that would help secure a table for our anniversary. She pulled out her wallet, but Diane held up a manicured hand. It's not a matter of deposits, she said, her voice lowering. La Mer caters to a certain clientele. We have standards to maintain. The implication hung in the air between them. Olivia felt her cheeks burn, not from embarrassment now, but from indignation. I see, she replied evenly. And those standards are based on appearance, not character. Diane's expression hardened. Madam, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the bistros downtown. They're quite lovely and more accommodating to casual diners. From her table, Sophia watched the exchange with undisguised satisfaction. She raised her voice just enough to be heard by nearby diners. Some people simply don't understand their place. A few patrons chuckled, emboldening Diane, who stepped closer to Olivia. I must ask you to leave. You're disturbing our guests. Olivia looked around, bewildered. I'm simply trying to make a reservation. How is that disturbing anyone? Sophia chimed in again from her table. Some people need to be told twice, apparently. Diane moved closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. Madam, either you leave voluntarily, or I'll be forced to have you escorted out. Olivia felt a surge of disbelief. This couldn't actually be happening. Is this how you treat all potential customers, or just the ones who don't arrive in designer clothes? The manager's patience visibly thinned. We have the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our establishment standards. And what standards would those be? Olivia challenged, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Diane glanced toward Sophia, who gave a subtle nod. The message was clear. Valued customers were being disturbed. David, Diane called to a young man in a suit standing near the entrance. Please escort this woman out. She's causing a disturbance. The young man looked uncomfortable but approached dutifully. Ma'am, if you could please come with me. Olivia remained rooted to the spot, processing the absurdity of the situation. You're actually throwing me out for trying to make a reservation while dressed comfortably? We're simply maintaining our atmosphere, Diane replied stiffly. Our clientele expects a certain environment. David hesitantly placed a hand near her elbow, careful not to actually touch her. Please, ma'am. Olivia looked around at the watching diners, some uncomfortable, others amused, most simply turning away to their conversations, dismissing the scene as unimportant. She thought about arguing further, about mentioning who her husband was, but every time she tried, someone would interrupt her. My husband is... Olivia began. Let me guess, Diane said with a smirk. Someone very important. We hear that quite often, I'm afraid. If you would just let me explain, Olivia tried again. There's nothing to explain, Marcus interjected. La Mer has clear standards, and we're simply enforcing them. With as much dignity as she could muster, Olivia allowed herself to be escorted toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear Sophia's satisfied laugh and her stage whisper. Finally! Some people are just too ordinary to belong here. As she reached the doorway, Olivia turned to look at the manager. You've made a mistake. The only mistake, Diane replied coldly, was allowing you through the door in the first place. David held the door open, his eyes downcast, clearly uncomfortable with his role in this public humiliation. As Olivia stepped outside into the cool evening air, she pulled out her phone. This wasn't how she had planned to involve James in her anniversary surprise, but plans had changed. What she didn't know was that her husband's sleek silver Tesla was already turning the corner, heading toward the restaurant. James had decided to surprise her after finishing his meeting early, remembering she had mentioned stopping by La Mer to make their anniversary reservation. The evening air felt unexpectedly cold against Olivia's flushed cheeks as she stood outside La Mer. The humiliation stung, not because she valued the opinion of people who judged her by appearance, but because the injustice was so blatant, so unapologetic. Through the glass doors, she could still see Diane and Marcus exchanging satisfied glances, as if they had successfully protected their precious establishment from an unwanted intruder. Olivia's fingers hovered over her phone, about to call James, when the distinctive hum of an electric vehicle caught her attention. A sleek silver Tesla Model S glided to a stop directly in front of the restaurant, its polished surface reflecting the golden lights from the entrance. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. She would recognize that car anywhere. Inside La Mer, the smooth operation of exclusive dining continued uninterrupted. Sophia was regaling her companions with some self-important story, her boisterous laughter carrying across the room. Marcus had returned to his post, while Diane was personally attending to another well-dressed couple. The restaurant's front door opened again, drawing Marcus's practiced smile, a smile that froze when he saw who entered. James Bennett stood in the doorway, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that exuded quiet wealth. At 40, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had nothing to prove, his success speaking for itself. His piercing blue eyes swept the restaurant with laser-like precision until they found Olivia outside on the sidewalk. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by something harder, more focused. "Good evening," Marcus greeted, his professional demeanor instantly engaged. "Welcome to La Mer. Do you have a reservation, sir?" James turned to him, his expression unreadable. "I'm meeting my wife." Marcus's smile brightened. "Of course, sir. May I have the name for your reservation?" "Bennett," he replied simply. "James Bennett." The effect was immediate but subtle. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment, the name Bennett carrying significant weight in San Francisco's business circles. He quickly recovered, though uncertainty now tinged his confidence. "Mr. Bennett," he said, managing to maintain his composure, "I don't believe we have a reservation under that name tonight." "That's because my wife came to make one," James replied, his voice level but with an edge that made Marcus straighten. "For our anniversary next week. She just stepped out, it seems." Marcus's complexion paled slightly. "Your wife was here. Perhaps you could describe her." James's gaze sharpened. Dark hair, navy sweater, probably mentioned our anniversary. The blood drained from Marcus's face as realization dawned. From her table, Sophia watched the exchange with growing interest, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Sir, there may have been a misunderstanding," Marcus began, but James was already moving past him, opening the door and extending his hand to Olivia. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly as Olivia took his hand and stepped back inside. "Not exactly," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the emotional current running beneath. The restaurant had grown oddly quiet, conversations tapering off as patrons sensed the unfolding drama. Diane approached quickly, having registered that something was amiss at the entrance. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her eyes darting between James's unmistakably expensive attire and Olivia's casual clothing, mental calculations visibly racing behind her practiced smile. "Yes," James said calmly. "I understand my wife was just asked to leave your establishment." Diane's professional mask slipped for just a second before settling back into place. "There must be some confusion. We have certain standards for our guests." "Standards," James repeated, the word hanging in the air like crystal about to shatter. "What standards exactly would prevent my wife from simply making a reservation?" Olivia watched as the restaurant staff's confidence began to crumble. Marcus was now frantically flipping through reservation cards, perhaps hoping to find evidence that he'd somehow accommodated Olivia after all. "Sir," Diane tried again, lowering her voice, "perhaps we could discuss this privately. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't think so," Olivia interjected, finding her voice. "You were quite clear about your standards and how I don't meet them." From her table nearby, Sophia cleared her throat loudly. "The woman was causing a disturbance," she offered, apparently unable to read the changing dynamics of the room. "Some people simply don't know how to behave in establishments of this caliber." James turned slowly, taking in Sophia for the first time. "And you are?" "Sophia Reynolds," she replied with evident self-importance. "My husband Jeffrey is a managing partner at Westbrook Ventures. We're regulars here." "I see," James said, his tone deceptively conversational. And you felt it necessary to involve yourself in how the restaurant treated my wife? Sophia's confidence wavered as she finally registered the subtle signs of power and wealth that James carried effortlessly, not in flashy displays, but in the quiet certainty of his bearing. Your wife, Sophia repeated, her voice losing its authoritative edge. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds. My wife, Olivia Bennet. James's voice remained calm, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Director of the Children's Healing Arts Program, board member of the Bay Area Sustainable Housing Initiative, and the woman who just wanted to make a dinner reservation to celebrate our anniversary at the place where I proposed to her. The silence in the restaurant was now absolute. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch through the service doors. Marcus stood motionless at his station, reservation books still open in his hands. Diane's professional smile had disappeared entirely. Olivia felt no triumph in their discomfort, only sadness at how quickly humans judge one another based on such superficial criteria. James, she said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. It's okay. Let's just go. But James wasn't finished. His gaze remained fixed on Sophia, who was now shifting uncomfortably in her seat. You know what fascinates me, Mrs. Reynolds? James continued. How often people confuse wealth with worth. La Mère remained suspended in a charged silence. Every eye was fixed on the tableau near the entrance. Olivia in her simple clothes, James in his perfect suit, and the restaurant staff caught in a moment of dawning horror. Mr. Bennet, Diane finally managed, her voice no longer carrying its earlier condescension. Please accept our most sincere apologies for this terrible misunderstanding. We would be honored to prepare a table for you and Mrs. Bennet immediately. James's expression didn't change. A misunderstanding, he repeated, the words hanging in the air. Is that what we're calling it? David, the young man who had escorted Olivia out, stood nearby, his discomfort palpable. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely distressed by what had transpired. Sir, Marcus interjected, his professional veneer cracking further. We had no way of knowing who Mrs. Bennet was. If she had just explained. She tried, David said quietly, surprising everyone including himself. Several times. Marcus shot him a withering glance, but the young man continued, something like conviction strengthening his voice. Mrs. Bennet tried to explain who she was, but she was interrupted. She mentioned her husband, but no one listened. Sophia, unwilling to be sidelined in the unfolding drama, rose from her table. Now see here. The woman was clearly underdressed for an establishment of this caliber. Rules exist for a reason. James turned to face her fully. Mrs. Reynolds, I'm curious. What exactly do you believe makes someone worthy of respect? The question hung in the air, deceptively simple yet devastating in its directness. Sophia blinked, caught off guard. Well, obviously, certain standards must be maintained, she blustered. People work hard to achieve a certain position in life, and with that comes certain privileges. Interesting, James replied. My wife works with children battling terminal illnesses. She develops art therapy programs to help them express trauma they can't put into words. She sits on boards that determine how millions in charitable funds are distributed. His voice remained conversational yet carried to every corner of the now silent restaurant. She chooses to dress practically because her work is about substance, not appearance. Olivia squeezed James's arm gently. This display wasn't his usual style. James typically avoided confrontation, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But tonight, watching the righteous indignation in his eyes, she was reminded of why she had fallen in love with him all those years ago. James, she said softly, it's really okay. He looked at her, his expression softening. It's not okay, Olivia. Not just because of you, but because of how many others they've probably treated this way. People who don't have the privilege of walking back in and exposing their prejudice. Diane stepped forward, desperation now evident in her manner. Mr. Bennet, please allow us to make this right. We can discuss this privately in my office. James turned back to her, his composure intact but his resolve evident. Make it right. I don't think you understand what's happened here. This isn't about getting a table now that you know who we are. It's about the fact that you believe some people deserve basic dignity and respect while others don't. Several diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the entertainment they had expected with their expensive meals. Not this mirror being held up to reflect the ugly side of exclusivity. From across the room, an elderly gentleman rose from his table. The man, distinguished in his understated evening wear, made his way over to James and Olivia. "Young man," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, "you are absolutely right." The man turned to face the restaurant staff. "My wife and I have been dining here for 15 years. We've watched this place change from a restaurant that valued character to one that values only appearances and connections. Tonight has confirmed what we've suspected for some time." His wife joined him, nodding in agreement. "We won't be returning," she added simply. Sophia, realizing the tide was turning against her, attempted to salvage her position. "Now, Walter," she said to the elderly man, "surely you're overreacting. Standards must be maintained, or else." "Or else what, Sophia?" Walter challenged. "Or else we might have to judge people by their character rather than their clothing." "What a terrible thought." David stepped forward again, removing his server's jacket. "Ms. Carter, I quit. I've been uncomfortable with how we profile guests for months, but tonight crossed a line I can't support." Diane's composure finally cracked completely. "David, don't be ridiculous. Think about your career." "I am," he replied simply, placing his jacket on the reception desk. Olivia watched this cascade of consequences with mixed emotions. She hadn't wanted this, hadn't intended to disrupt so many lives or create such a scene. Yet perhaps this moment of reckoning was overdue. "James," she said quietly, "let's go home." James nodded, knowing that spectacle had never been Olivia's style. As they turned to leave, Diane made one desperate final plea. "Mr. Bennett, please. Your reservation for your anniversary. We would be honored to host you. Complimentary, of course." James paused at the door, turning back to face the restaurant. The patrons, the staff, Sophia, all waited for his response. "The purpose of our anniversary dinner," he said finally, "was to celebrate love, growth, and values that matter. I'm afraid those values are incompatible with what this establishment represents." As they stepped outside into the evening air, Olivia slipped her hand into James's. "That was quite a scene," she said, a smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Too much?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. Olivia considered this for a moment. "No," she decided, "not too much. Sometimes the world needs to be reminded that worth isn't determined by appearances." As they walked toward James's Tesla, neither noticed David exiting the restaurant behind them. He called out hesitantly, "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett?" They turned, surprised. "I just wanted to say," he began, then gathered his courage. "What happened in there wasn't right. And, well, I'd like to thank you for standing up. Not just for Mrs. Bennett, but for all the others who have been treated that way but couldn't do anything about it." James smiled, extending his hand. "Thank you for speaking the truth, David. That takes real courage. Do you have other plans?" Olivia asked suddenly. "No, ma'am," David replied, confusion evident on his face. "Then join us for dinner," she offered. "We know a wonderful little Japanese place where they judge the food, not the guests." As the three walked away from La Mer, the weight of the evening's confrontation lifted. Behind them, through the restaurant's windows, Diane could be seen addressing her staff with urgent gestures. Marcus sat at his station, shoulders slumped, and Sophia stood alone at her table. The center of attention she'd so craved now focused on her for all the wrong reasons. 3 weeks later, Olivia sat in her community garden, fingers coated in soil as she planted seedlings with a group of children from her art therapy program. The afternoon sunlight warmed the fresh earth as laughter filled the air. This was her sanctuary, a place where worth was measured by intention and effort, not appearances or status. James approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one near Olivia, careful not to disturb her work, then knelt down to help a small boy plant a tomato seedling. "The board approved David's proposal," James said after the children had moved on to another activity. Full funding for the Arts Access Initiative. Olivia smiled, brushing soil from her hands. I had a feeling they would. He has a natural talent for seeing potential where others don't. After that night at La Mer, David had reached out to Olivia about his long-held dream of creating accessible arts programs in underprivileged communities. With her guidance, he developed a proposal for the Bennett Foundation, transforming his experience in the service industry into valuable insights about breaking down barriers to participation. Did you see the article? James asked, sipping his coffee. Olivia nodded. The San Francisco Chronicle's feature on La Mer had created quite a stir in the city's dining scene. Not because it exposed what had happened to Olivia, she had specifically asked that her name be kept out of it, but because it sparked a broader conversation about exclusivity, judgment, and the invisible barriers that divided people. Diane called again, James added. Third time this week. After the incident, Diane had left La Mer, her departure part of the restaurant's very public commitment to re-examine its values. Her heartfelt letter of apology to Olivia had been unexpected, not just expressing regret for that one evening, but acknowledging a pattern of behavior she was now working to change. Maybe we should talk to her, Olivia suggested, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. Everyone deserves a chance to grow. James smiled at his wife's characteristic compassion. You never cease to amaze me, you know that? After how she treated you. It's not about forgetting what happened, Olivia clarified, finally looking up from her work. It's about choosing how that experience shapes us moving forward. Diane might become a powerful advocate against the very thinking she once embodied. James nodded, understanding. This was why he had fallen in love with Olivia in the first place. Her ability to see beyond the surface to find potential for good in the most unlikely places. It was what made her work with children so transformative, what made her presence on foundation boards so valuable, and what made her his moral compass when success threatened to distort his perspective. We still haven't decided where to celebrate our anniversary, James reminded her. Their actual anniversary was just 2 days away. Olivia's hands stilled on her gardening trowel. Actually, I have an idea about that. The following evening, James and Olivia stood outside a modest wooden building in a neighborhood far removed from the glittering facades of San Francisco's high-end dining district. A simple sign read, "Community Table," and through the windows, they could see people of all ages and backgrounds gathered around large wooden tables. Are you sure about this? James asked, though he already knew the answer. Olivia nodded. David said they're doing amazing things here. A pay-what-you-can model, cooking classes for kids, job training for those re-entering the workforce. It represents everything we believe in. Inside, they were greeted by a diverse staff who treated every guest with the same warm welcome. No one looked twice at Olivia's simple dress or raised an eyebrow at James's absence of tie. They were seated at a long table beside a family celebrating a child's birthday and across from an elderly woman dining alone. Throughout the meal, simple but beautifully prepared food, James and Olivia were struck by the genuine community being fostered within these walls. Conversations flowed freely between tables. Laughter erupted spontaneously. The staff moved among the guests like old friends rather than servants. Midway through their dessert, David appeared, his face alight with purpose as he introduced James and Olivia to the restaurant's founder, a former executive chef who had walked away from a prestigious position to create this inclusive space. What do you think? David asked, his enthusiasm evident. It's perfect, Olivia replied sincerely. This is exactly what celebration should feel like. Authentic, inclusive, joyful. As they prepared to leave, James discreetly arranged to cover meals for everyone in the restaurant that evening and to make a substantial donation to their community programs. Not as a display of wealth, but as an affirmation of values worth supporting. Outside, under a canopy of emerging stars, Olivia slipped her hand into James's as they walked to his car. The same Tesla that had caused such a stir at La Mer, now just a means of transportation rather than a statement. Happy anniversary, James said softly, stopping to face his wife. 8 years, and you still help me see the world more clearly. Olivia smiled, the lessons of recent weeks settling into perspective. Do you remember what you told me when we first met? That the most valuable things in life can't be bought or displayed. James nodded, remembering their early conversations when he was just a promising engineer and she was launching her art therapy program. That night at La Mer, Olivia continued, reminded me that we're all constantly making choices about what we value, about who deserves respect and attention, and those choices reveal who we truly are. As they drove through the city streets, neither James nor Olivia noticed the small sign in the window of what had once been La Mer. Under new management, all are welcome. Some transformations happen in dramatic moments, like a confrontation in an exclusive restaurant. Others occur quietly, through reflection and choice, one person at a time. But all meaningful change begins with the recognition that true worth can never be determined by appearances alone.